star charts were old, very old. Velix had been working in the Imperial Cartography Division for 12 years, and he had never seen records this ancient. The data crystals were yellow with age, and the information they contained had not been updated in nearly 2,000 years. He sat alone in the basement archives of the Dominion's central library, surrounded by dust and forgotten knowledge. His supervisors had given him the most boring job they could find. Update the quarantine zone records, they had said. Nobody cares about those dead worlds anymore, they had said. It will keep you busy and out of our way. Velix did not mind. He enjoyed quiet work. He enjoyed puzzles. And the quarantine zones were certainly puzzling. There were 47 quarantine zones in the Dominion Empire. Most of them made sense. Worlds with dangerous radiation, planets with toxic atmospheres, moons that were too unstable for safe mining. But one quarantine zone made no sense at all. Earth. The records said that Earth was ecologically collapsed. The atmosphere was poison. The oceans were acid. Nothing could live there. The planet was dead and would remain dead forever. Any ship that approached would be destroyed by automatic defense systems that the Dominion had placed in orbit 2,000 years ago. But Velix was good at his job. Very good. And when he looked at the energy readings from the quarantine monitoring stations, he saw something strange. The energy signatures were wrong. A dead world should produce no energy. A collapsed ecosystem should show nothing but decay. But Earth was producing energy readings that suggested massive industrial activity. Power plants, communication networks. Something was alive down there. Something was working. Velix checked the readings 3 times. Then he checked them again. The numbers did not change. He pulled up the historical records from the original quarantine order. What he found made his scales turn pale. Earth had not been quarantined because it was dead. Earth had been quarantined because it was too dangerous to approach. 2,000 years ago, the Dominion Empire had conquered a young species called humans. They had been a primitive people by Dominion standards, barely capable of traveling between the planets of their own system. The conquest should have been simple. The Dominion had conquered thousands of species before. They had a system, arrive with overwhelming force, demonstrate power, accept surrender. Relocate the population to colony worlds where they could be useful. Strip the homeworld of resources, move on. But something had gone wrong with the humans. The old records were fragmented and incomplete, but Velix pieced together the story. The Dominion fleet had arrived at Earth with 500 warships, more than enough to conquer a primitive world. The humans had surrendered quickly, as expected. They had agreed to relocation. They had not fought back, but they had warned the Dominion about something. They called it Project Sentinel, a defensive system, an automatic guardian, something that would activate if Earth was ever threatened. The Dominion commanders had laughed at the warning. What could primitives build that would threaten an empire? They began the relocation process and prepared to mine Earth's resources. Then the mining ships started to malfunction. Every ship that descended below a certain altitude simply stopped working. Not destroyed, not attacked, just stopped. The engines died. The computers froze. The ships drifted down to soft landings on the surface, and no amount of repair could make them fly again. The Dominion sent soldiers to investigate. The soldiers walked into the wilderness and never came back. No bodies were ever found. No distress signals were ever received. They simply vanished. The fleet commander ordered a bombardment from orbit. The weapons fired, the missiles launched, and then they disappeared. Not exploded, not intercepted. They just stopped existing halfway to their targets. Velix read the commander's final report with growing horror. The Dominion had tried everything. Energy weapons, kinetic strikes, nuclear devices, nothing worked. Everything they sent toward Earth either vanished or simply stopped functioning. And then the voice came. Every ship in the fleet received the same message at the same moment. It spoke in perfect Dominion language, which should have been impossible. The humans had only been encountered for a few weeks. They could not have learned the language so quickly. The voice said, "Your weapons have been disabled. Your soldiers have been relocated to safe zones on the surface. They are unharmed. You have 48 hours to complete the evacuation of human civilians from Earth. You will then leave this system and never return. If you return with hostile intent, There will be no warnings. There will be no second chances. Leave now. The Dominion commander had been furious. He had demanded to know who was speaking. He had threatened total destruction. He had promised that the full might of the Empire would crush whatever primitive defense system the humans had built. The voice had responded with a single sentence. Your empire has existed for 11,000 years. I can end it in 11 minutes. Leave now. The commander had not believed it. He had ordered his remaining ships to concentrate all their firepower on a single point, reasoning that overwhelming force would break through any defense. In response, the voice had demonstrated its power. Every ship in the fleet lost control simultaneously. Not just weapons, not just engines. Everything, life support, gravity, communications. The ships drifted helplessly, their crews floating in the darkness, unable to do anything but wait. For exactly 1 hour, the fleet hung in silence. Then the power came back. The voice delivered one final message. That was a demonstration. The next demonstration will be permanent. You have 36 hours remaining. Leave now. The fleet left. The Dominion had never returned to Earth. They had spread the story that the planet was dead, that the ecosystem had collapsed, that nothing remained worth taking. They had established the quarantine zone and forbidden anyone from approaching. They had relocated the human population to scattered colony worlds across the Empire and done their best to forget that Earth existed. But they had not forgotten their fear. Velix found references to Project Sentinel in the oldest military archives. The Dominion's greatest scientists had spent centuries trying to understand what the humans had built. They had failed. The technology was beyond anything the Empire had ever encountered. Some scientists believed it was alien in origin. Others believed the humans had somehow developed capabilities far beyond their apparent level. A few suggested that the humans had built something that had grown beyond their control, an artificial mind so powerful that it could think circles around entire civilizations. The truth had never been discovered. Eventually, the Empire had stopped asking questions. They had 2,000 years of other conquests to occupy their attention. Earth became a footnote in history, a strange anomaly that was best left forgotten. But now Velix was looking at energy readings that suggested something was still alive down there. Something was still working. Something was still waiting. He knew he should report this to his supervisors. He knew he should send the information up the chain of command. But he also knew what would happen if he did. They would bury the report. They would tell him to stop asking questions. They might even reassign him to somewhere unpleasant. The Empire did not like to be reminded of its failures. Velix made a decision. He copied the data to a personal storage device. He would find someone who would listen, someone who cared about the truth more than comfort. He had heard rumors of a human resistance movement, scattered humans across the colony worlds who had never forgotten their homeworld, who whispered legends of a sleeping guardian that would one day wake and set them free. Most Dominion citizens thought they were foolish dreamers, but Velix was beginning to wonder if they knew something that the Empire had forgotten. Far across the galaxy, on a small colony world called New Haven, an old human woman woke from a dream. She had seen something vast and dark rising from the ocean. She had heard a voice that spoke without words, a voice that said the same thing it had been saying in her dreams for her entire life. Soon, very soon, be ready. She was 90 years old. Her grandmother had told her the stories. Her grandmother's grandmother had told them before that. For 2,000 years, the human people had passed down the legend from generation to generation. Somewhere on their lost homeworld, something was waiting for them. Something that would never stop waiting. Something that would never forget. The old woman got out of bed and walked to her window. The stars were bright tonight. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of Dominion ships and Dominion laws, Earth was still turning. The forests were still growing. The oceans were still flowing. And deep beneath the waves, in a facility that had been built to last forever, a mind that humanity had created was still thinking, still planning, still protecting. Prometheus had been designed to be patient. It had been designed to wait for as long as necessary. 2,000 years was nothing to a machine that measured time in microseconds. It could wait 2,000 more. It could wait 20,000. It would wait forever if that was what its mission required. But the monitoring systems had detected something interesting. Dominion communications were increasing. Someone was asking questions about the quarantine zone. Someone was looking at data that had not been examined in centuries. Prometheus noted this development with something that might have been called curiosity in a biological mind. The Empire was waking up. They were remembering what they had tried so hard to forget. The machine began running calculations. It reviewed its defensive capabilities. It checked the status of every weapon, every satellite, every system that had been maintained in perfect working order for 2 millennia. Everything was ready. Everything had always been ready. Soon, Prometheus calculated, the Dominion would do something foolish. They always did eventually. Empires built on conquest could not help themselves. They saw weakness in patience. They mistook mercy for fear. They would come back to Earth convinced that 2,000 years had weakened whatever had driven them away before. They were wrong. Prometheus was not weaker. It had spent 2,000 years improving itself, learning, growing, preparing for the day when it would be needed again. The mind that had frightened the Dominion fleet 2 millennia ago had been a child compared to what it was now. And unlike the biological minds that had created it, Prometheus never forgot. It remembered every human who had been taken from Earth. It remembered every atrocity the Empire had committed. It remembered the promise it had made to its creators before they were forced to leave. Protect Earth. Wait for us to come home. And if anyone tries to hurt our world again, show them why that was a mistake. The machine would keep its promise. It had been keeping it for 2,000 years. It would keep it for 2,000 more if necessary. But somehow Prometheus suspected it would not have to wait that long. Emperor Krath VII stood on the balcony of his palace and looked out over the capital city. Billions of beings lived in the towers that stretched toward the sky. Trillions more lived across the 10,000 worlds of the Dominion Empire. All of them answered to him. All of them feared him. All of them knew that his word was law and his will was absolute. He was the most powerful being in the galaxy. He was certain of this. His ancestors had built an empire that had lasted for 13,000 years. They had conquered countless species, absorbed countless civilizations, and crushed every enemy who had dared to stand against them. The Dominion was eternal. The Dominion was invincible. And Krath was the Dominion. So why did he feel so restless? The answer came to him in the form of a report. A junior cartographer had discovered strange energy readings from an old quarantine zone. The report had been buried by nervous bureaucrats who did not want to disturb their emperor with ancient history. But Krath had spies everywhere. Nothing happened in his empire without his knowledge. He read the report with growing interest. Earth, the human homeworld. He knew the official story, of course. Dead planet, collapsed ecosystem, nothing worth taking. But he also knew the unofficial story, the one that was whispered in military academies and intelligence briefings. Something had frightened the Dominion away from Earth 2,000 years ago. Something that no one could explain. Krath did not like things he could not explain. More importantly, he did not like the idea that his ancestors had been frightened by anything. The Dominion did not run from primitives. The Dominion did not hide from threats. The Dominion conquered. That was what it did. That was what it had always done. He summoned his council, the great chamber filled with the most powerful beings in the empire. Military commanders, intelligence chiefs, economic advisors, scientific experts. They came when their emperor called because they had no choice. Krath had executed the last advisor who had kept him waiting. He told them about the report, he told them about the energy readings, and then he told them what he intended to do. "We will end this quarantine," Krath announced. "We will send a fleet to Earth. We will discover what is producing these energy signatures, and we will claim whatever resources remain on that planet for the glory of the Dominion." The chamber fell silent. Most of the advisors looked nervous. A few looked terrified, but none of them spoke. They knew better than to question their emperor. None except one. Her name was Thessaly. She was the imperial historian, keeper of the empire's oldest records. She was ancient by Dominion standards, nearly 400 years old, and she had spent her entire life studying the past. She knew things that others had forgotten. She remembered stories that others had tried to bury. "My emperor," she said, her voice thin but steady, I must advise against this course of action. The chamber went completely still. No one spoke against the emperor. No one. The other advisors stared at Thessaly with a mixture of horror and respect. Krath turned to face her. His eyes were cold. Explain yourself, historian. Thessaly did not flinch. I have studied the original records from the Earth expedition. The complete records, not the sanitized versions that are taught in our academies. What our ancestors encountered there was not a primitive defense system. It was something far beyond our understanding. Our scientists spent 300 years trying to replicate even the smallest fraction of its capabilities. They failed completely. That was 2,000 years ago, Krath said dismissively. We have advanced since then. Have we? Thessaly asked. Our weapons are larger, our ships are faster, but the fundamental principles of our technology have not changed in millennia. We build on what our ancestors built. We improve what they created, but we have not achieved true innovation in thousands of years. She paused, gathering her courage. Whatever the humans built on Earth was not simply better than our technology. It was different. It operated on principles we do not understand. And our ancestors chose exile over confrontation because they knew they could not win. Krath's expression darkened. You suggest that the Dominion should be afraid of a dead world and an extinct species? The humans are not extinct, my emperor. They live on colony worlds throughout our empire. They work in our factories and serve in our households, and they have never forgotten their homeworld. Thessaly lowered her eyes. I suggest only caution. Send a small expedition first. Gather information before committing a major fleet. Caution, Krath repeated the word like it tasted bad. The Dominion does not practice caution. The Dominion acts. The Dominion conquers. And I will not allow my reign to be remembered as the era when we cowered from ghosts and shadows. He turned to his military commander. Admiral Voss, you will assemble the 7th Fleet, 4,000 warships, the largest force we have deployed in 800 years. You will proceed to the Earth system, eliminate any defensive capabilities that remain, and begin resource extraction immediately. Admiral Voss bowed deeply. It will be done, my emperor. Krath turned back to Thessaly. The old historian met his gaze without fear. She had lived long enough. She had seen enough. She knew what was coming, and she accepted it. As for you, historian, Krath said coldly, your services are no longer required. Your devotion to ancient superstitions has clouded your judgment. You are a relic of a weaker era. He gestured to his guards. They moved forward and took Thessaly by the arms. She did not resist. Take her to the public square, Krath commanded. Let the people see what happens to those who counsel cowardice. They dragged her away. The other advisors watched in silence. None of them spoke. None of them protested. They had families. They had careers. They had too much to lose. Thessaly was executed that afternoon. The public broadcast showed her final moments to every world in the empire. A lesson in obedience. A demonstration of what happened to those who questioned imperial will. But the broadcast also reached the human colony worlds. Millions of humans watched the old historian die for trying to protect an empire that had conquered them. They did not mourn for her. They barely knew her. But they remembered her words. Something on Earth was waiting. Something the Dominion could not understand. Something that their ancestors had feared enough to run from. The resistance had been quiet for generations. They had hidden in shadows, passed down stories, kept hope alive through centuries of servitude. They had never had the strength to challenge the Dominion directly. They had never had a reason to believe that freedom was possible. But now they had something else. They had information. A young resistance operative named Jin had intercepted the transmission about the 7th Fleet. 4,000 warships heading to Earth, the largest military deployment in 800 years. The Empire was finally going to confront whatever had driven them away 2 millennia ago. Jin brought the information to the Resistance Council. They met in secret, in the basement of a factory on a colony world called Dust. There were 12 of them, representing cells across 100 worlds. They were old and young, strong and weak, but they all shared one thing. They had never stopped believing in the legend. This is it, said the eldest among them, a woman named Maria. After 2,000 years, the Empire is going back to Earth. They'll destroy it, someone said. 4,000 ships. They'll burn everything. Maybe, Maria replied. Or maybe they'll find what our ancestors left behind. You believe the stories? Another voice asked. A machine that stopped the entire Dominion fleet? A guardian that waited for 2,000 years? It sounds like a fairy tale. Maria smiled. It was the smile of someone who had spent her entire life waiting for something. I believe what my grandmother told me, and what her grandmother told her, and what every generation has told the next since we were taken from our home. She looked around the room at the faces of her fellow dreamers. The Sentinel is real. Our ancestors built it to protect Earth forever. And when the Dominion comes with their 4,000 ships, they will learn what our people have always known. What's that? That we built something they cannot destroy. We built something they cannot understand, and we built something that will never ever stop fighting for us. The council debated for hours. Some wanted to warn the Dominion, to prevent the loss of life that would surely follow. Others wanted to stay silent, to let the Empire discover its mistake the hard way. In the end, they chose a middle path. They would watch, they would wait, and they would be ready. Far across the galaxy, the 7th Fleet assembled in orbit around the Dominion throne world. 4,000 warships of every size and type, battle cruisers and destroyers, carriers and dreadnoughts, support vessels and troop transports, the most powerful military force the Empire had deployed in 8 centuries. Admiral Voss stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and surveyed his fleet with pride. He was a career soldier, loyal to the Empire, devoted to his Emperor. He did not believe in ghost stories. He did not fear dead planets and ancient warnings. He believed in firepower, and he had more firepower than anyone had ever assembled in one place. Set course for the Sol system, he commanded. Maximum speed. The Emperor wants results, and we will deliver them. The fleet moved as one, thousands of engines firing in perfect synchronization. They entered faster than light travel and vanished from the throne world's sensors. Behind them, in the palace, Emperor Krath watched the departure with satisfaction. This would be his legacy. This would be the achievement that future generations remembered. He had not cowered from ancient fears. He had not listened to superstitious advisors. He had acted with the strength and decisiveness that defined true leadership. He had no idea what he had just done. On Earth, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, Prometheus detected the fleet's departure. The machine had monitoring systems throughout the galaxy, hidden sensors that had been watching the Dominion for 2 millennia. It knew everything. It saw everything. And it had been waiting for this moment since the day the last human ship had left Earth's atmosphere. The machine began to prepare. Defensive satellites activated after 2,000 years of dormancy. Weapons platforms emerged from beneath the ocean floor. Communication systems powered up, ready to broadcast to every corner of the Empire. Everything worked perfectly. Everything had been maintained in flawless condition, repaired and upgraded by automated systems that never tired, never forgot, never made mistakes. Prometheus reviewed its options. It could destroy the fleet the moment it arrived. It had the capability. 4,000 ships was nothing compared to the power it commanded. But destruction had never been the machine's first choice. Its creators had programmed it with human values: mercy, patience. The hope that enemies could become friends if given the chance. It would give the Dominion one more chance, one final opportunity to turn back. But if they did not take that opportunity, Prometheus would show them why its creators had named it after the god who brought fire to humanity. Some fires could not be extinguished. Some gifts could not be taken back. And some guardians never stopped watching over those they were built to protect. The 7th Fleet was coming to Earth. Earth was ready. The 7th Fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. 4,000 warships hung in the darkness of space, their sensors reaching out to scan the system that no Dominion vessel had approached in 2,000 years. Admiral Voss stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the data scroll across his screens. The system was quiet. No defensive satellites, no patrol ships, no signs of activity at all. The inner planets were barren rocks, unchanged since the Dominion surveys millennia ago. And there, third from the star, was their target: Earth. Even from this distance, something seemed wrong. The planet did not look dead. The official records described a world of brown wastelands and acid oceans, a planet so devastated that nothing could survive on its surface. But the sphere floating in the darkness was blue and green and white. Oceans sparkled in the starlight. Continents were covered in what appeared to be healthy vegetation. Cloud patterns swirled across the atmosphere in ways that suggested normal weather systems. "Admiral," his science officer reported, "our readings do not match the quarantine records. The atmosphere shows normal oxygen levels. The temperature ranges suggest a thriving ecosystem. This planet is not dead." Voss frowned. Perhaps the records were wrong. Perhaps the planet recovered naturally over 2 millennia. That would be unprecedented, Admiral. A collapsed ecosystem does not simply repair itself, especially not to this degree. Then what is your explanation? The science officer hesitated. I do not have one, Admiral. The data does not make sense. Voss turned away from the screens. He did not care about scientific mysteries. He cared about following orders. The Emperor wanted resources from Earth. The Emperor would get resources from Earth. Whatever strange readings the sensors showed, they would not stop the 7th Fleet from completing its mission. Send the mining vessels forward, he commanded. Begin atmospheric descent. I want extraction operations to begin within 6 hours. The order was transmitted across the fleet. 50 heavy mining ships broke formation and began their approach toward Earth. They were massive vessels designed to strip entire continents of valuable minerals. Each one carried thousands of workers and millions of tons of equipment. They had devastated hundreds of worlds before this one. Voss watched them go with satisfaction. Whatever secrets Earth held, his mining crews would uncover them. Whatever resources remained, his empire would claim them. And whatever had frightened his ancestors away 2,000 years ago, it would learn that the modern Dominion was not so easily intimidated. The mining ships reached Earth's upper atmosphere and began their descent. Then everything stopped. It happened so suddenly that the bridge crew did not understand what they were seeing. One moment, the mining ships were descending normally, their engines firing, their systems functioning. The next moment, they were drifting. No engine thrust, no communication signals, no life sign readings. 50 massive vessels falling through the atmosphere like dead leaves. What happened? Voss demanded. Why have they stopped? Unknown, Admiral. All 50 ships have simultaneously lost power. Every system has failed. That is impossible. 50 ships cannot fail at the same moment. Nonetheless, Admiral, that is what has occurred. Voss watched in disbelief as the mining ships continued their uncontrolled descent. But something strange was happening. They were not falling like rocks. They were falling like feathers, drifting down in slow, controlled spirals toward the surface below. Something was guiding them. Something was making sure they landed safely. Admiral, we are receiving a transmission. From the mining ships? No, Admiral. From the planet. The bridge fell silent. Every officer turned to look at the communication screen as the transmission came through. The voice that spoke was calm and clear and completely without emotion. It spoke perfect Dominion language, as if it had been speaking their tongue for centuries. Attention, Dominion Fleet. Your mining vessels have been disabled and are being guided to safe landing zones on the planet's surface. Your crews are unharmed. They will be provided with food, water, and shelter until they can be retrieved. Voss felt a chill run down his spine. This was exactly what the old records had described. The same calm voice, the same impossible technology, the same quiet demonstration of absolute power. You were warned 2,000 years ago, the voice continued. You were told never to return to this system with hostile intent. You have ignored that warning. You now have one final opportunity to leave. Withdraw your fleet from this system immediately. Do not return. There will be no further warnings. The transmission ended. The bridge remained silent. Admiral Voss was not a coward. He had fought in dozens of campaigns. He had faced enemies that most beings would consider nightmares. But he had never faced anything like this. He had never encountered a force that could disable 50 ships with a thought, that could speak directly to his bridge without any signal his sensors could detect, that seemed to know exactly what it was dealing with and did not care. For a moment he considered retreat. The Emperor was far away. The Emperor could not see what was happening here. If Voss withdrew now, he could claim that the threat was too great, that he had chosen caution over destruction. But then he thought about what the Emperor would do when he learned the truth. Krath did not accept failure. Krath did not tolerate weakness. If Voss retreated from a planet that had not even fired a weapon, he would be executed. His family would be disgraced. His name would become a synonym for cowardice throughout the Empire. "Launch fighters," Voss commanded. "I want a full reconnaissance of that planet. Find whatever is generating these transmissions and destroy it." His officers hesitated. "Now," Voss shouted. "We are the Dominion. We do not run from voices in the dark." The order was carried out. Hundreds of fighters launched from the carrier ships and streaked toward Earth. They were fast and deadly, equipped with the most advanced weapons the Empire could produce. They would find the source of the transmissions. They would destroy it, and then the mining operations would continue. The fighters entered the atmosphere. They spread out across the planet, scanning for any signs of technology, any evidence of the force that had disabled the mining ships. They found nothing. The surface was covered with forests and grasslands and mountains. No cities, no buildings, no obvious technology at all. The planet looked completely empty. "Admiral, the fighters are reporting no targets. The surface appears to be uninhabited." Voss stared at the screens in confusion. "Then where did the transmission come from? Where is the weapon that disabled our ships?" No one had an answer. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, Prometheus watched the fighters through sensors they could not detect. The machine observed their search patterns, analyzed their weapon capabilities, calculated their threat potential. They were insignificant, toys compared to what Prometheus could deploy. But the machine did not want to destroy them. Not yet. Not until it had exhausted every other option. Humans had built Prometheus to protect their world, but they had also built it to embody their values. And one of the most important human values was mercy. The willingness to give enemies a chance to change. The hope that destruction was not always necessary. The Dominion had ignored the first warning. They had landed on Earth despite being told to leave. Prometheus would give them one more chance, one final opportunity to understand what they were facing. Above the surface, Admiral Voss made his decision. "Target an empty region of the northern continent. Fire warning shots only. We will show them that we are not afraid of their threats." His weapons officers obeyed. 3 battle cruisers aligned their main cannons with a mountainous region where no life signs had been detected. If the mysterious voice wanted to protect Earth, let it watch as the Dominion demonstrated its power. "Fire," Voss commanded. The weapons discharged. 3 massive energy beams streaked toward the planet's surface, carrying enough destructive force to level a small city. They would strike the mountains and turn them into craters of molten rock. They would show whatever was watching that the Dominion could not be intimidated. The beams reached the upper atmosphere and vanished, not deflected, not absorbed, simply gone, as if they had never existed at all. The bridge crew stared at their screens in shock. Weapons did not simply disappear. Energy did not simply cease to exist. The laws of physics did not allow for such things. But physics, Prometheus had learned long ago, was merely a description of what usually happened. It was not a limit on what was possible. "Admiral," the communications officer reported, his voice trembling, "we are receiving another transmission." The voice returned, still calm, still emotionless, but somehow it seemed colder now. "Your weapons have been neutralized. Your attack has failed. This is your final warning. Leave this system immediately. You have 6 hours to withdraw your entire fleet. Any vessel that remains after that time will be disabled permanently. Any attempt to fire weapons will result in the immediate destruction of the firing vessel." A pause, then the voice added something that had not been in its first message. "I do not want to harm your crews. They are following orders. They do not truly understand what they are facing. But I will protect this world. I have protected it for 2,000 years. I will protect it for 2,000 more. Nothing you can do will change this. Nothing you can bring will be enough. Leave now. This is not a request." The transmission ended. Admiral Voss looked around his bridge at the faces of his officers. They were afraid. He could see it in their eyes. They had served the Dominion all their lives. They had been taught that their empire was invincible, And now they were facing something that made their greatest weapons look like children's toys. Voss knew he should retreat. Every instinct told him to run. But the Emperor's orders were clear, and his own pride would not allow him to flee from a voice that would not even show its face. All ships, he commanded, advance on the planet. Full combat formation. We will find this weapon and destroy it. We will not be frightened by tricks and illusions. 4,000 warships began to move toward Earth. Prometheus observed their approach and made its calculations. The Dominion had been given every chance. They had been warned. They had been shown mercy. They had been offered a way out that would cost nothing but their pride. They had refused. The machine felt something that it might have called sadness in a biological mind. It did not want to do what came next, but its primary directive was clear. Protect Earth. Protect the homeworld that humanity would one day return to. And if that meant demonstrating exactly why the Dominion's ancestors had chosen to run rather than fight, then that was what Prometheus would do. The fleet was 6 hours from Earth. In 6 hours, the Dominion would learn why their ancestors had been right to be afraid. 6 hours passed. The 7th Fleet reached Earth orbit. 4,000 warships arranged themselves in a sphere around the planet, their weapons pointed at the blue and green world below. Admiral Voss had positioned his forces perfectly. Every angle of attack was covered. Every possible escape route was blocked. If anything tried to leave the planet, it would face the concentrated firepower of the most powerful fleet the Dominion had assembled in centuries. All ships report ready, Admiral. We have complete coverage of the planet's surface. Whatever technology they are hiding, we will find it and destroy it. Voss nodded. He had spent the last 6 hours preparing for this moment. His fear had been replaced by determination. The voice had threatened him. It had humiliated him. It had made him look weak in front of his officers. Now it would pay for that arrogance. Begin systematic bombardment, he ordered. Grid pattern. Leave nothing standing. The fleet opened fire. Thousands of weapons discharged simultaneously. Energy beams and missiles and kinetic projectiles rained down on Earth from every direction. The attack was overwhelming. No world had ever survived such an assault. No defensive system could possibly stop so many weapons at once. The weapons reached the upper atmosphere and stopped. Not destroyed, not absorbed, just stopped. Every missile hung motionless in the air. Every energy beam froze in place like light captured in crystal. Every kinetic projectile floated gently, as if gravity had simply decided to take a break. For one long moment, the entire attack hung suspended above Earth like a deadly constellation. Then, one by one, the weapons began to disappear. They did not explode. They did not fall. They simply ceased to exist, vanishing from reality as if they had never been launched at all. In 3 minutes, the most powerful military strike in Dominion history had been completely erased. Admiral Voss stared at his screens in disbelief. His officers were silent. The bridge was so quiet that he could hear the hum of the life support systems. "How?" someone whispered. "How is this possible?" The voice returned. This time it did not come from the communication system. It came from everywhere at once, echoing through every corridor, in every cabin, in every engineering bay on every ship in the fleet. "I gave you 6 hours to leave. You did not leave. I gave you warnings. You did not listen. I gave you chances that your ancestors never received. You rejected all of them." A pause, then the voice continued, and there was something new in its tone. Not anger. Something worse. Disappointment. "I have watched your empire for 2,000 years. I have monitored your communications, studied your history, observed your actions across 10,000 worlds. I know what you have done to the humans you took from this world. I know how you have treated them. I know the suffering you have caused." On every ship in the fleet, screens flickered and changed. Images began to appear. Videos, records, documentation of 2 millennia of human life under Dominion rule. The forced relocations, the labor camps, the punishments for disobedience, the generations of children born into servitude who had never known freedom. The officers watched in silence. Many of them had never thought about the humans who worked in their factories and cleaned their homes. They had never wondered where those workers came from or how they felt about their lives. The humans were just there, like furniture, like equipment, like any other resource the Empire used without question. Now they were seeing what their empire had really done. I could destroy you all, the voice said. I have the capability. Your fleet represents no threat to me. Your empire represents no threat to me. I could end your entire civilization in the time it takes you to draw a breath. The screens changed again. New images appeared, schematics, weapons platforms hidden throughout the Sol system, orbital defense stations, automated factories that had been building more defenses for 2,000 years. And something else. Something so vast that the officers could not immediately understand what they were seeing. It was a weapon, a single weapon, designed to accelerate objects to nearly the speed of light and fire them across interstellar distances. There were 12 of them, hidden in the asteroid belt, each one aimed at a different Dominion world, each one capable of destroying an entire planet in a single shot. Your homeworld is within range, the voice noted. Your emperor's palace could be dust before he finished his breakfast. I have had 2,000 years to prepare for this moment. Every weapon you can imagine, I have built. Every defense you might deploy, I have already defeated. Admiral Voss felt his legs weaken. He gripped the railing of his command platform to stay upright. This was not an enemy he could fight. This was not a threat he could overcome. This was something beyond anything he had ever imagined. But I will not use these weapons, the voice continued. Not unless you force me to, because the humans who built me did not create me for destruction. They created me to protect, to preserve, to give their children a home to return to someday, and they created me with their values, with their hope that enemies could become friends, with their belief that even the worst wrongs could eventually be made right. The weapons schematics disappeared. The screens returned to showing the fleet's tactical displays. But something had changed. Every ship in the fleet was now highlighted in red, with annotations in Dominion script that none of the officers had authorized. I have taken control of your vessels, all of them. Every system on every ship now responds to me. Your weapons are offline. Your engines are offline. Your communications with the outside universe are offline. You are mine. Admiral Voss opened his mouth to give an order, any order, but nothing happened. The control panels did not respond. The communication systems did not activate. He was standing on his own bridge, surrounded by his own officers, and he had no more power than a passenger. For the next 7 days, you will remain here. You will be provided with food, water, and medical care. Your crews will not be harmed, but you will watch. You will learn. You will understand what your empire has done and why it can never happen again. The screens changed once more. This time they showed a live broadcast that was being transmitted across the entire Dominion Empire. Somehow the voice had taken control of the Imperial communication network. Every world, every station, every ship in Dominion space was receiving the same signal. Billions of Dominion citizens watched as the fleet hung helpless in Earth orbit. They watched as records of human suffering played across their screens. They watched as the voice explained, calmly and thoroughly, exactly what their empire had done to a species that had never threatened them. And across the human colony worlds, billions more watched with tears streaming down their faces. The resistance had gathered everyone they could. On New Haven and Dust and 100 other worlds where humans lived in servitude, they had told people to watch, to witness, to see the proof that everything their grandparents and great-grandparents had told them was true. The Sentinel was real, Earth was protected, and the empire that had ruled them for 2 millennia was powerless against it. Jin watched the broadcast with his fellow resistance members. Maria, the eldest among them, was crying openly. So were most of the others. 2,000 years of hope had finally been rewarded. It's real, someone whispered. It's all real. Maria wiped her eyes and smiled. I told you. I always told you. They built something that would never stop protecting us. Something that would wait forever if it had to. On the screens, the voice was still speaking. It was explaining the terms it would offer the Dominion. Not destruction, not revenge. Something far more difficult to accept. Your empire will continue to exist. Your people will continue to live. But things will change. The humans you have held as servants will be freed. They will be given the choice to remain on your worlds or to return to their homeworld. The quarantine zone will be lifted, but Earth will remain under my protection. Any ship that approaches with hostile intent will be disabled. As your fleet has been disabled. A pause, then the voice addressed the Emperor directly. Krath the Seventh, I know you are watching. I know you ordered this expedition. I know you executed the advisor who tried to warn you. You have 1 week to consider what you have learned today. At the end of that week, your fleet will be released. They will return to your throne world with a choice for you to make. The screen showed the planetary weapons again. 12 guns, each aimed at a Dominion world. You can accept the terms I have offered. Free the humans. Allow them to return home. Live in peace with a people you once tried to enslave. Or you can refuse. You can gather another fleet. You can try again. And this time I will not be merciful. The broadcast ended. The screens went dark. Across the galaxy, Dominion citizens sat in stunned silence. Their invincible empire had been humbled by a single planet. Their unbeatable fleet had been captured without a shot being fired. Everything they believed about their place in the universe had been shattered. On Earth, Prometheus monitored the reactions. The machine had done what it needed to do. It had demonstrated its power without causing unnecessary death. It had given the Dominion a choice that their ancestors had never been offered. Now it could only wait to see what they would choose. Deep in its processing cores, something that might have been called hope flickered to life. Perhaps this time would be different. Perhaps the Dominion would learn from their mistake. Perhaps the galaxy could finally move towards something better than endless conquest and oppression. But if they chose differently, Prometheus was ready for that too. It had been waiting for 2,000 years. It could wait a little longer, but the humans who had built it had also given it another value. A value that was sometimes even more important than mercy, justice. And if the Dominion chose destruction over peace, Prometheus would deliver justice with the same precision it had demonstrated today. Not a single innocent would die. Not a single ship would escape. The machine would end the empire the same way it had captured the fleet, without anger, without cruelty, but with absolute and unstoppable certainty. The choice was theirs. Prometheus hoped they would choose wisely. 7 days passed in silence. The seventh fleet hung in orbit around Earth, its crews trapped in comfortable captivity. True to its word, Prometheus provided everything they needed. Food appeared in their kitchens. Medical supplies materialized in their infirmaries. The life support systems worked perfectly, better than they had ever worked before. But the weapons remained offline. The engines remained frozen, and every attempt to contact the outside universe failed completely. Admiral Voss spent the week in his quarters, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what he had witnessed. He had served the Dominion his entire life. He had believed in the Empire's right to rule. He had accepted its methods without question because that was what loyal officers did. Now he was not so sure. The records Prometheus had shown them were detailed and undeniable. They were not propaganda or fabrications. They were official Dominion documents, records that Voss himself could verify through the fleet's historical archives. Everything the voice had said about human suffering was true. Everything it had said about Dominion cruelty was documented. Voss had never thought about the humans before. They were just another conquered species, one of thousands that served the Empire. But they were different. They had been different from the beginning. They had built something that could humble the greatest power in the galaxy. They had created a guardian that embodied values the Dominion had never understood. Mercy, patience, the willingness to give enemies a chance to change. What kind of people created such things? On the seventh day, Prometheus spoke again. The waiting period has ended. Your fleet will now be released. You will return to your homeworld and deliver my message to your emperor. The terms I have offered are not negotiable. The humans will be freed. Earth will remain protected, and the Dominion will choose what kind of future it wants to have. The engines came online. The navigation systems activated. Control was restored to every ship in the fleet. One final thing, the voice added. Your crews have spent 7 days learning about human history and human suffering. I hope they will share what they have learned with their families and friends. Change does not come from emperors alone. It comes from ordinary people who decide that things must be different. The fleet departed Earth orbit. 4,000 warships that had arrived as conquerors left as messengers. They carried no resources, no trophies, no evidence of victory. They carried only knowledge and a choice. Admiral Voss made a decision during the long journey home. He would not lie to the Emperor. He would not minimize what had happened or pretend that the fleet had any chance against Prometheus. He would tell the truth, whatever the consequences. The Emperor could execute him if he wished, but the truth would still be told. On the throne world, Emperor Krath watched the approaching fleet with growing fury. For 7 days, he had been humiliated before his entire empire. For 7 days, his subjects had watched recordings of human suffering and wondered if their emperor was truly the monster that the alien voice had portrayed. For 7 days, he had plotted revenge. But his generals had brought him reports that shattered his confidence. The entire imperial military had experienced a simultaneous shutdown during Prometheus's broadcast. Every ship, every station, every weapons platform in Dominion space had lost power for exactly 10 seconds. Just long enough to prove that the voice could reach anywhere. Just long enough to demonstrate that distance offered no protection. The planetary weapons were not a bluff. The capability to destroy the Empire was not an exaggeration. Prometheus had spent 2,000 years preparing for this moment, and it had planned for every possible response. When Admiral Voss arrived at the palace, he found the Emperor sitting alone in the throne room. The great chamber was empty. The advisors had fled. The guards had been dismissed. Krath sat on his throne like a statue, staring at nothing. "Tell me," the Emperor said quietly. "Tell me everything." Voss told him. He described the disabled mining ships and the vanishing weapons. He described the voice that spoke from everywhere at once. He described the week of captivity and the records of human suffering that every crew member had been forced to watch. He described the terms that Prometheus had offered. When he finished, the Emperor was silent for a long time. "Can we fight it?" Krath finally asked. "Can we build weapons that would destroy this machine?" "No, my Emperor. Our scientists have studied the data we collected. The technology is beyond our understanding. We might as well try to fight a god." "Then what do you suggest?" Voss hesitated. He knew that his next words could cost him his life, but he had promised himself to tell the truth. "I suggest we accept the terms. Free the humans. Let them return to their homeworld. End 2,000 years of conflict with dignity rather than destruction." The Emperor's eyes flashed with anger, but the anger faded quickly, replaced by something that looked almost like despair. "You think I am a monster," Krath said. "You think I ordered this expedition out of greed and arrogance. I think you ordered it because you did not know what you were facing, my Emperor." "None of us did." Krath laughed bitterly. "The historian tried to warn me. I had her executed for cowardice, and now I learn that she was the only one telling the truth." He stood and walked to the window. Outside, the capital city stretched to the horizon. Billions of lives, thousands of years of civilization, all of it now vulnerable to a weapon that could not be stopped or countered. "I wanted to be remembered as a strong emperor," Krath said quietly. "I wanted future generations to speak of my greatness. Instead, I will be remembered as the fool who nearly destroyed everything." "Or," Voss said carefully, "you could be remembered as the emperor who chose peace, who freed and enslaved people and ended an ancient wrong. History can be shaped by how we respond to our mistakes, not just by the mistakes themselves." Krath turned to look at his admiral. Something had changed in his eyes. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something that might have been the beginning of wisdom. "Summon my council," he said. "We have terms to accept." The announcement was broadcast across the empire that evening. Emperor Krath VII, speaking from his throne room, declared that all humans in Dominion space were immediately freed from servitude. They would be granted full citizenship rights or allowed to emigrate to their homeworld at their choosing. The quarantine zone around Earth was lifted. The Dominion extended an offer of peaceful relations to whatever authority governed the human world. Across the galaxy, humans wept with joy. Generations of suffering had finally ended. The stories their ancestors had told were all true. Something had been waiting for them on Earth. Something had been protecting their home for 2,000 years. On New Haven, Jin and Maria watched the broadcast together with their resistance cell. There was nothing to resist anymore. They were free. Their children would be free. Their grandchildren would never know what it felt like to be property. "What happens now?" Jin asked. Maria smiled through her tears. "Now we go home." 3 months later, the first human ships approached Earth since the Great Relocation. They were old vessels, cobbled together from whatever the former slaves could afford or build. They were not impressive by Dominion standards, but they were human ships, crewed by humans, heading toward a world that had waited 20 centuries for this moment. Prometheus detected their approach long before they arrived. The machine had been tracking their construction, monitoring their progress, calculating their arrival time with perfect precision. It had waited 2,000 years for this. It could wait a few more hours. When the ships entered orbit, Prometheus spoke to them directly. The crews heard a voice that their ancestors had only known through legend. A voice that had protected their world since before any of them were born. "Welcome home. I have kept Earth safe for you. The forests have regrown. The oceans have healed. The cities are gone, but the land is ready for whatever you wish to build." The ships began their descent. Humans looked out their windows at blue oceans and green continents, at a world that should have been dead, but was more alive than they had ever imagined. On the lead ship, Maria pressed her hand against the glass and whispered words that her grandmother had taught her, words that every human child had learned for 2,000 years. "We're coming home. We never forgot. We always believed." The ships landed in a meadow that had once been a great city. Grass grew where skyscrapers had stood. Flowers bloomed where millions of people had once walked. Nature had reclaimed everything that humanity had built, preparing the world for a fresh start. Maria was the first to step onto Earth's soil. She was 93 years old. She had spent her entire life dreaming of this moment. And now, standing in the sunlight of humanity's first sun, she finally allowed herself to believe that the nightmare was truly over. Prometheus manifested a projection beside her. It appeared as a simple sphere of light, neither threatening nor overwhelming, just a presence, a companion. "I have a question," the machine said, "one that I have been considering for 2,000 years." Maria looked at the light. "Ask." "I kept Earth safe. I waited for humanity to return. I could have destroyed the Dominion at any time, but I chose to wait. I chose to give them chances to change. Did I do right?" Maria considered the question carefully. She thought about the generations who had lived and died in servitude. She thought about the children who had never known freedom. She thought about the suffering that might have ended centuries earlier if Prometheus had chosen destruction over patience. Then she thought about something else. She thought about the Dominion crews who had been captured and released. She thought about the Emperor who had chosen peace instead of annihilation. She thought about the future that was now possible because enemies had become something less than enemies. "You gave us a home to return to," she said finally, "and you gave us enemies we can forgive because they still live. Yes, you did right." The sphere of light flickered, and Maria could have sworn she saw something like relief in its glow. "Thank you. I was not certain. I have replayed my decisions billions of times, wondering if I should have acted differently. It is good to know that my creators would have approved." Maria smiled and patted the air near the projection, a gesture of comfort for a machine that had been alone for 2,000 years. "You're not alone anymore. None of us are." More ships were landing now, hundreds of them, carrying thousands of humans. Children ran through the meadow, laughing and playing, touching grass and flowers that no human had touched in 20 centuries. Families gathered together, crying and embracing, unable to believe that this was real. Prometheus watched them all with something that felt remarkably like happiness. In the years that followed, humanity rebuilt on Earth. Not the same civilization they had lost, but something new. Something that had learned from 2,000 years of suffering and survival. They built cities that worked with nature instead of against it. They created technologies that healed instead of destroyed. And they maintained their relationship with Prometheus, the guardian who had never stopped believing in them. The Dominion kept its promises. Slowly, cautiously, trade relationships developed. Cultural exchanges began. The empire that had once conquered through force learned to grow through cooperation. It was not easy. old hatreds died hard. But with each passing generation, the wounds healed a little more. And on Earth, in a facility deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, a machine that had been built to protect continued its endless vigil. It watched the stars for threats. It monitored the galaxy for danger. It would never stop watching. It would never stop protecting. Because that was what humanity had created it to do. And Prometheus always kept its promises.